Hello and welcome to Group Chat. I am Justin Verrier, and joining me, Rob Mahoney, Big Woz. One pod before the holiday break. Gentlemen, this is usually where you bore us with a bunch of stuff about what you're making, so I give you the floor. What are we spatchcocking? What are we baking? What are we grilling? What are we broiling? What are we roasting, Rob?
I want to hear Woz first. I feel like Woz always really lays it out. I want to know the spread. I want to know what has come to your mind in terms of how to make this Thanksgiving a truly unique experience.
So I'm going to disappoint you guys this year. I'm not making anything. I'm blessed in the sense that I'll be here in LA, but one of my friends is hosting, and let's just say he makes a lot more money than I do, and he's just going to have it catered.
Oh,
that's the move.
Yeah, and so I will just be bringing my favorite wine to the festivities and imbibing on catered bites, as well as, my favorite Willamette Valley Pinot Noir.
There we go.
That's it. That's what I'm doing for Thanksgiving. Although for Friendsgiving, I had a Friendsgiving last night.
Yeah.
For which I contributed a mashed potato.
Okay.
Which what I did was, obviously I did use the russet potatoes. I know some people at Yukon Gold. I do the russet. I actually put some of the skins in there because I wanted to have a little bit more texture. Infused it with the milk that had rosemary, garlic, sort of as you brought it up to temp.
Yes.
And so it was like an infused milk, and that's what you use to make it a little bit creamier, and get the garlic and rosemary herb, and then obviously salt and pepper. People seem to like it. That was it.
I mean, mashed potatoes can do no wrong. Someone in the Ringer recipe Slack, I want to say it was Justin Charity. If it wasn't Charity, forgive me, whoever recommended this, pointed me toward putting mascarpone cheese in mashed potatoes.
A lot of people do cheese with mashed potatoes. I've never been a cheese potato guy, but I'm not against it.
It really worked out for me, I gotta say. But Justin, to answer your question more broadly, we're going by the book this year, which is to say the book that I have rewritten to exclude turkey and focusing primarily on prime rib. We're hitting a lot of the greatest hits. My question for you guys is, as I am formulating my Thanksgiving menu, how many desserts is the right number of desserts for a Thanksgiving spread? Obviously you need a pumpkin pie. I think that's
some
essential.
kind of pie.
But you also kind of want a chocolate thing, I feel like.
Yeah, I would say three.
Three plus or minus one, I think, is the move.
I mean, 2 is not right.
Really?
Yeah,
I think 2 is essential, but 3 is like you have too much and you want options and you also want leftovers.
Oh, for sure. The leftovers are a critical part of the whole process.
And because you're pigeonholed into the damn pumpkin pie, I like the idea of having 3 because the pumpkin pie thing is pumpkin everything in the fall
blasphemy.
And all of that. I don't do the pumpkin. I don't play with pumpkin.
I'll go the opposite way.
I'm done with this podcast. I'm out.
I'm going the opposite way. I want pumpkin pie outside of Thanksgiving. Like I want it November 1st. I want it December 23rd. I also want it July 4th. How about that? Give me all the pumpkin all the time.
Dude, somebody brought the freaking sweet potato marshmallow thing that people do.
Yeah.
I'm out on that.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not my thing.
I don't want to get into that holy war. That's a whole thing.
Yeah. I was watching something before we came on. Instead of bringing a wine, perhaps maybe a digestif. You're full of pie. You want something a little sweeter, but you don't want more dessert. Digestif. There you go.
Like that. We had a few of those in Italy this summer. So
did you?
I like that idea. Yes.
You're really bringing the sophistication today, Justin. I feel like, wine is great, but also wine is basic. Digestif, you're really standing out amongst your
That's right.
The kind of people that Woz is apparently hobnobbing with.
That's right.
Listen, if you're in the Willamette Valley, just drinking those Pinots week after week, you got to go to the next level. That's right. I was having one yesterday, in fact. So
look at you.
I hear you on that. Yeah. All right, let's get to the matter at hand here. Our own NBA potluck, as we do every year before Thanksgiving. One team, one player, one take for all of us. We're going to start with the team portion in this round. And we're going to start with one of my picks, which is the Dallas Mavericks, a team that is quite confusing. as of right now. They lose 4. They win 4. They lose last night. Luka's out. It's just kind of been a slower start than I think we were all expecting going into this season. I think we thought they would be, with a bullet, one of the best teams in the Western Conference. On the one hand, Rob, they lose those 4 games by a combined 8 points. You would think that a team with Kyrie and Luka will sort out the clutch mess and all that sort of stuff. On the other hand, without Luka last night against the Heat, they lose against that one in overtime. They probably should have lost in regulation because Derek Lively loses Jimmy Butler going to the rim, should have been called for a foul. And so I'm stuck in the middle here where I think the Mavs are a good team, and a lot of the data suggests that they're a good team, but they're actually losing the type of games I'd expect them to win more than anybody else.
Yeah. I think coming into this year, I expected them to be a better regular season team because they were so hurt at the beginning of last year, and because they obviously made the in-season trades that significantly improved their front line. But maybe what I forgot about and what I was glossing over a little bit was the fact that Jason Kidd, as a regular season head coach, is sometimes just out there doing shit, like just throwing lineups at the wall, just like letting Spencer Dinwiddie ride for as long as he wants to ride. Sometimes it's just kind of like seeing what works and seeing what combinations might make sense. And there is maybe exploratory is giving it too much credit in terms of the way that the Mavericks play, but they do try things and they do have a different gear. And clearly, for whatever reason, they are just like not aligned and quite right at this point in the season. There's just been too many games where like the effort isn't quite there for the first couple quarters, where they don't fully look coordinated for the first couple quarters. They find it in the end. And there have been bright spots on this team, certainly, and great wins, as you outlined, Justin. Like, I think this is a good team that right now is playing really uneven and sometimes actively like not good basketball. And that's not what I expected from this talent base, to say the least.
I'm actually reminded of a Trae Young quote, of all people, which it was the regular season after they'd gone on their Cinderella run to the conference finals in the East, and they were kind of underperforming, which they ended up underperforming for the season. And he told the media, he was like, look, man, like after you play in the postseason, in big second round games, in big conference finals games, it's hard to get super pumped for these early regular season slogs. Like it's like I can't trick myself into treating these games as do or die when I've so recently been in actual do or die, high intensity games on the biggest stages in our sport. And I think that quote applies to what's happening in Dallas right now with their finals run, with a team that's, basically intact from that run, and they know what it takes to, reach the highest echelons of the sport. And I think it's been kind of a malaise, on a team-wide basis, but even individually, it feels like Luka hasn't become fully engaged yet. He turns it on in fourth quarters where he starts yelling and cursing and spit flying out of his mouth at opposing fans, but he's not maintaining it for full games. So I think it's just a sort of cruise control kind of thing. And there's enough veterans on this team that I think that's kind of legitimate, whereas the Hawks was a bunch of young guys, and it's like, all right, you flukily beat the Sixers. Like, what are we doing here? Like, the Mavs have Kyrie, they have Luka, who's an MVP candidate. Like, I think it's a little bit more legitimate, but like you guys, I would like to see them turn into this year's version of a team that's going to make another finals and conference finals run.
Yeah, I do think even the best of times toward the end of last season, they were still figuring things out because they made pretty dramatic, radical changes to the lineup. And I think going into this season, everyone was hoping that they would kind of hit the ground running because they found who they are in the finals, in the playoffs. Even Derek Lively, a rookie at that point, seemed like he was ready to hit another level. In their defense, I would say that they did change enough on the fringes that they are working in a bunch of new rotation players, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes, all that sort of stuff. They got a full season of this big man rotation with Gafford and Lively. You have Gafford, who's the veteran. Lively is the up-and-comer. Like, how does that really sort itself out? And one thing to their benefit is I think they're starting to find things that will work for them down the road. I think Quentin Grimes has been very good.
Yep.
He's a guy who I thought worked for them because he is pretty programmatic. He is a catch and shoot guy who will play defense. I thought he's showing a little bit more off the bounce than I was expecting. He had one play where he attacked a closeout against Hero and found Lively on a short lob. And I was like, what was that? Like that's something I didn't expect for him. And if he can keep doing more of that, I think that helps them down the road. Lively in particular, another guy who, despite the misstep against Jimmy, he just will switch out onto the perimeter. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy looks incredibly comfortable out there. He reminds me a lot of what I think a lot of us wanted from Willie Cauley-Stein originally. Like that guy was supposed to be this
what a callback
1-5 juggernaut game-wrecking defender. I think Lively can be that, but it has been slower than what we're expected. So I think to their benefit, I think this will help them down the road more. I think if you're worried, Rob, it's more that, the defensive lapses you see, and even especially from Luka, it just really hits what you worry the most about them is when they need Luka to be a defender. He's not there. He coasts through these regular seasons, despite the fact that for the past, 5 years, we predicted him to win MVP. It's like it really just hits the one thing you're worried the most about. And so I don't know whether to give that too much credence or not enough.
I'm almost not worried yet. Like, I think it's fair to look at the Mavericks' performance so far and be disappointed. There's a lot to be disappointed in, especially on a game-by-game basis. In terms of chronic problems that are actually going to limit them in a playoff setting, I just don't see it as of yet. Like, I think they have limitations, as any roster does. Like, they're finding out, as the Warriors did, what it's like to live and die with Klay Thompson's jumper sometimes in terms of his minutes. They're figuring out, as you said, like for as great a defender as Derek Lively can be, the fact that he is still a young player and can still be spotty at times in terms of his reads and his reactions to things. Like they have all of these elements that they're trying to incorporate. And I believe in those elements. And I believe in like Kyrie, I think has had a really strong season overall. Luka has not. If Luka plays well, the Mavericks are really, really good. He's not playing well and they're still winning a lot of games, at least enough to split against really good teams in a lot of these cases. So it's odd because you're right. They are dropping the games that you would expect them to win and vice versa sometimes. But ultimately, like I like the overall shape of this roster. I like what Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes, as you alluded to, have brought to this group. I just think their team makes sense. And I think overall, there's still enough like evidence to suggest that it will.
Yeah, and last year when they ended the season on a hot streak and got a bunch of people excited with all the momentum they had going into the playoffs, they were a top 5, top 3, I believe, defense after the All-Star break or something like that. Like they finished the season on a defensive tear and proved themselves to be one of the best, more elite units in the entire league. And obviously that's just not been the case to start the season. And I think their defense will be able to pick it up and become closer to the version that we saw last year, both to end the regular season and in the playoffs, which to me is where they kind of made their hay, stifling OKC and their other playoff opponents. And so that to me is where I think it has to pick up if they're going to completely take off outside of Luka, just taking things more seriously.
All the indicators suggest they're a very good team, top 10 team. Like they're top 10 in virtually every unit.
Yeah.
The problem has literally been just the close games, and it's just so bizarre. Again, they lost those 4 games in that 4-game losing streak by a combined 8 points in total, and it forced them to have already a film session in the locker room after the Utah loss. The Utah loss was abysmal.
That was really bad.
And I guess that's the sort of thing that happens when you lose to Utah in such dramatic fashion. But it seemed a little early for that. But I think we're all in agreement that I think they're fine. We just would like to see them be more than fine because this is a team I think would be in the upper echelon, the top 5 of the league, if they can get things right. And it's not that much to get things right, as you're saying.
So in Potluck terms, what are the Mavericks to you, Justin? Are they like a weird 70s style, like Jell-O salad that you're just showing up with and being like, here it is?
I guess if the teams are the mains, maybe they are the turkey where it's like, all right, like it's a staple, know, you can't go wrong with it. But
Gets
is
the job
anyone
done.
super excited about them right now? Probably not.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. What about who wants to go next? You want to go with your ham, or what do you have here?
It is, you know what? It is a little bit more of a ham. It's a hardier set. It's a heavier lift. It's burlier than you might expect sometimes. It's the Los Angeles Clippers, winners of 5 straight games. Now, basically tied with the Lakers for 4th place in the Western Conference. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see it coming that the Clippers would have a better point differential than not only those Lakers, but the Wolves and the Suns, quality Western Conference teams. They're just doing it. And I have to say the formula is exactly the same that it's been all season. It's not exactly a surprise given what their personnel is. It's a lot of James Harden. It's a lot of Norm Powell when he's healthy. And it's one of the most stifling, flexible defenses in the entire league. They're not always fun to watch because of that. They can turn like really slow games down and really stymie opponents. But damn if it isn't effective. And I just didn't think that this collection of players, which is a bunch of role players we really like, would be able to operate at this kind of level. And we'll see if they can over the course of the regular season, but 18 games in, I think they're absolutely worth celebrating.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when I watched them beat the Golden State Warriors when I was in the building at Intuit Dome last week. And what I noticed is definitely their connectedness on defense. Like, these guys do play on a string. It sounds cliche, but that's how you make up the difference when you don't have talent. It's effort. It's execution. It's attention to detail. And the Clippers are nailing that, man. And, you know, a lot of it just feels unsustainable. Like, I'm watching Norm Powell make 5 of 6 threes in a big game against the Warriors. And I'm like, can he just do this over the course of 82 games? I guess. You know, even Harden, like, when you're watching it, he's not beating anyone. He's not getting past anyone. When he does actually get to the cup, like, there's barely any elevation. He has no hops whatsoever anymore. It's all being glued together with just guile and smarts and veteran know-how. But, you know, these guys do play hard, man. They're one of the hardest playing teams, I would say. And two things that I will take away from seeing them in person last week. One, Jeff Van Gundy is very invested in these games. It's just crazy to watch him stalking the sidelines with Ty Lue. Ty Lue has apparently just empowered this guy to be the co-head coach, and he's super into what's happening right there, and that was jarring. And two, I want to thank the Intuit Dome for making me a first-time winner.
Wow.
At the stadium.
Look at
So
that.
they did the thing where the card sort of parachutes down from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And this thing is coming right at me. And the older dude who was in his he was in his 80s, y'all, in the seat right below me. He reached up and I just snatched this thing from him. And it was a card for a free deluxe chicken sandwich from the great people at Chick-fil-A. So this is the first time I've ever won anything in stadium. Another thing happened that game, like one of these dudes.
Hold on. Before we get into other things, you just ripped a deluxe chicken sandwich out of the mouth of an 80-year-old man?
Out of his mouth, yeah, metaphorically. Not out of his hand, because I just snatched it before his hand could even touch it.
Well, yeah, he can't move. Would you expect him to jump for that thing?
It was tough. Elderly, I got beat out. It's tough, man. Sorry about that. But yeah, and like not long after that, some dude launched a freaking t-shirt at me.
Ooh.
And I got my right hand on it, and it hit my hand so freaking hard.
Yep.
It just smashed and ricocheted 3 seats down to the left of me, and those people got the t-shirt. So all in all, just an eventful night at Intuit Dome. Steph Curry magic, you know, Clippers, you know, defense, Norm Powell on a freaking heater. And I'm winning my first ever parachute launch at the Intuit Dome.
And losing your first t-shirt cannon encounter. That's the karmic balance of the universe, if I've ever heard it.
It's tough.
Did you buy any like chips by scanning your retina?
I did. I did buy them. I've checked my app and I still have not been charged.
I think we'll say if there's any if there's any Intuit Dome reps out there, please charge Waz for some chips.
It was a
with
cheeseburger and a pizza. Surprisingly good cheeseburger, honestly.
Okay.
Yep.
It is a cool building. I enjoy the vibe in there. The wall is legit. Good atmosphere.
Oh yeah.
I think it's tough with some of these new arenas where some of them feel like a little overly sterile. The Intuit Dome feels like it's from the future, which I think battles some of that sterility a little bit.
You feel like you've been transported into a Jetsons episode.
Definitely
for the kids out there, that was a futuristic cartoon when we were kids.
God, perhaps aliens. You know, I think that's a reference people get nowadays, or is that still
it?
dated?
Well,
Yeah,
I guess
that's-
you
I might
got
be older.
Romulus going, so hopefully they're at least familiar with that.
Yeah.
But you know what? The Clippers are delivering it. I think the worst
Yeah.
case scenario for a new arena like that is that the team comes in and just stinks it up. Kawhi Leonard hasn't played a game yet. It was a huge wild card coming into the year. Is this team even going to be watchable? And I think they play a style of basketball that, especially in the arena, if you are a Clippers fan, is really exciting. Turning
Do we
people
want
over,
Kawhi
fighting.
back?
Let's
Do we
relax.
want
Well,
Kawhi back?
Let's
So here's my
relax.
question. I do think they're winning because what they've done is they've traded star shit for shit that just wins regular season games. Like you don't have to deal with the consternation of whether Paul George is playing, whether Kawhi is playing. They just seem like they have a very solid floor. And I think that's defense, first and foremost, fifth defense in the NBA. And Chris Dunn, we need to talk about Chris Dunn because
yeah,
he's
we
been
do.
pretty good.
Strapping dudes.
Him and Derrick Jones Jr. together has just been pretty much a revelation for this team. And if you look at any of the two-man combinations, it's like put Chris Dunn with literally any other player on the roster and it's going to be good because he just does so many helpful things. Like you don't know what he does offensively that's like elite, but he just checks off a lot of boxes so that he can wreck shit on the defensive end. And then on the other side, just like Zoo being huge and leveraging the fact that he's huge. Like they go to him in post-up situations. Harden is a good partner for him. And I think you've seen him go to him more because he's just has to find other guys. And so like they're big, they play defense. And then when they need to, Harden and Powell do enough offensively. Like we talked about Harden, like offensive numbers are pretty startling. Like they're really bad.
Yeah.
But he can orchestrate still. And so this leads to the Kawhi part of it where it's like, if they just insert Kawhi into the Dunn or Derrick Jones spot, like, can they just compete on a higher level? I don't know, because I assume Kawhi, if he does come back, will be some hobbled version of what he is. And we'll go through the whole rigmarole of like, is he playing back-to-backs? Is he up to speed? And like, how many minutes is he playing? That will continue on for another 2 months until we get to the playoffs. Then ultimately he'll be out in the first round. But I think there's like a clear slot for him to join them and maybe hit the ground running. But I've been through this so many times, Rob, where I have to stop myself and say like, just put cold water all over myself because I don't think it's going to happen. But you see the theory. You see on paper that it could work.
The problem with that is we know this is the ultimate team that they're going to actually have on the floor. Kawhi's going to come back and play for a little bit and be gone again, because that's what he always does. And so the fact that they're playing with their real actual team right now and playing well, I think that's an encouraging point, because this idea that Kawhi's going to come back and finish off and play 50-something games, I find it to be laughable. It's just, how can we think that that's going to happen at this point?
He's not going to save anything. And on the other side of that, look, the Clippers have played really well. I think they're deserving of this spotlight. You don't need to worry about disrupting the very fragile equilibrium of the Clippers by withholding Kawhi Leonard. Like, they're playing to compete, and I think Kawhi Leonard, even when he is somewhat limited, is physically competitive, and he does fit inside the style of what they're trying to do. Like Justin, as you were reeling through the attributes and kind of like what has made this team successful, one of the things that stuck out to me is like you talked about them as being a big team, and it's like they are and they aren't. Like they're really long and they're versatile in that way, but they are a team.
Mostly Zoo.
It's Zoo is enormous, and he is
exactly
the kind of center who you will see even very traditional fives match up against him, and he just absolutely bodies them.
The Sixers game against Yabusele, like he's just so much bigger, and he could just post up again. Yeah.
Goga Batadze, like, and these really traditional bigs will try to guard him and just have absolutely no shot. Yeah. That's legit size. Everything else is mostly guys playing above their weight and fighting above their weight in lots of ways. The one exception to that, in a sense, is Derrick Jones Jr., who is a really good rangy defender and a decent finisher inside when he can get some momentum, clearly a great dunker, but historically not a great rebounder, right? Like not a guy who's battling for the boards. Will fight for loose balls. He's putting in the effort. He's just very slight. And the way the Clippers make up for that, to be the best damn defensive rebounding team in the entire league, is mostly through Zoo, but also through guys like Harden and Chris Dunn, like these guards who are getting in the mix and coming out with balls and making that balance work. And so there is this overall shape of a team where, yeah, Harden, because he has the ball in his hands a lot, is kind of the de facto star of this team in a sense. And Norm Powell, because he's popped so much this season, is getting and deserves a lot of credit. But if you told me like figure out what the heart of the Clippers is, or who is kind of bringing that to the table. To me, it's the sort of interchanging trio of Zoo and Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. Like, those guys embody what the Clippers are and why they're winning. And the fact that you're getting above 500 basketball from that is a really remarkable thing.
Yeah, they're also third in rebounding percentage overall, and they're only 0.2 percentage points from first. So this is a very good rebounding team. I think you're right. It's like you look at all the fundamentals, and it's like, what do you want from a good team? Like, I don't need to break out the 4 factors or anything right here.
Yeah, yes, you do.
They do kind of check those boxes, right? And it's just like, oh, how is good basketball played? It's like they kind of do all of that. And so I do think there is a
ball
spot.
over, clean your glass, get back on defense.
And so can Norm downshift back to a 6-man role, and Kawhi jumps into that starting lineup, and they don't skip a beat defensively, and he could maybe just be more of an offensive player. Again, I see it, but what's going to happen is Kawhi is going to come back later than we think. He's going to play well. We're all going to talk ourselves into this despite ourselves, and then he's ultimately going to disappoint us. And so I don't want to do it, but I think it's going to happen. I think he's going to play, and they're going to look good, because the other part of this is they don't have their draft pick. And so that's going to go to OKC. And so they have every incentive to be halfway decent here. And so I could see them being play-in team in the way that, like, I think a lot of people thought that they might bottom out this season, despite the fact that, like, they have every incentive to win this year. Since we're talking about draft picks, should we talk about one of your teams, Waz, who has no draft picks for the foreseeable future and yet finds themselves playing particularly well?
Yeah, man, it's the Milwaukee Bucks, and it's another quote. It's actually a Godfather this time. It's like, just when I think I'm out, they keep pulling me back in.
Never heard that one before.
Is that new?
Winners of 4 in a row, 6 out of 7. Obviously, the schedule has sort of opened up for them in that they're getting to play weaker opponents. And I text you guys, basically the schedule until January 6th.
Yeah.
A lot of cupcakes on there. A lot of get right, get healthy against teams. And it's 2 things that I want to flag about what's happening. One, Doc de-emphasizing the olds and letting AJ Green and Jackson Jr. get some goddamn run. Thank you. Yes, young guys are allowed to play. Young guys do have strengths. They're athletic and energetic and provide a pop and a boost to an older, more aging lineup to give them some sort of, energetic balance. Like, it works. And it's nice that Doc has done that. But 2, man, at the end of that Pacers game, and let's face it, the Pacers aren't the best defense in the history of mankind.
No, they're not.
We know that. But what I liked, again, and I've talked about with the Bucks, is process. And they spammed that Dame and Giannis pick and roll in crunch time in ways that I've never quite seen them do before. And it wasn't just Dame and Giannis interplay on Giannis screening for Dame. It was Dame coming in to screen for Giannis, ghost cut to a flare screen, a flare 3, open 3. It was like, oh, there's some like dynamism happening here. Real offense happening here. So it's like, it's the nuts and bolts of giving different guys, younger guys, an opportunity, which Doc is always hesitant to do. It's, I think, the offense not having to be so Giannis, dictating the pace. And so he can free himself up for game-winning blocks at the end of the game. You know what I mean? And so it's the process that I like. It's the schedule opening up. And I like that the young guys are getting reps.
It's nice to see them finally putting something together. Justin, I think where I'm having trouble is the Bucks always look different when it feels like they actually have enough live bodies out there and when their role players are actually giving them good minutes. And I'm with you, Waz, like taking Pat Connaughton out of the mix, finding more minutes for AJ Green, like those are real differences in terms of their play style and real differences in terms of the on-court product that I think have had a really positive result on the team. How much of this is just like Gary Trent Jr. being back from the dead? How much of this is like you get the good Bobby Portis game instead of the bad Bobby Portis game? I'm struggling to find the signal or the noise in here and figure out which is which.
And another thing with Chris Middleton being out, no idea, no timeline. Apparently, the last time he was on the court, I guess he looked really rickety. And so the timeline just keeps getting pushed back further and further. And you wonder what he's going to add, man, because, we talk about what Drew Holiday used to do defensively, but there was a time, folks, where Chris Middleton was a defensive player too. Not that he was like, all world or anything, but he was more than competent. Really good. And so was Grayson Allen, right? And so, there was a time Grayson Allen was pretty decent on the perimeter. I'm not saying he was great. He was certainly better than Gary Trent Jr. We can say
there
that.
are levels. There are levels.
We can say that.
Yeah. Okay.
I wonder if Chris Middleton, if he still has it in him to move his feet on defense, man. And so that's a question mark that still lingers for me. But man, if Dame and Giannis could get it together and form the basis of a real elite dynamic offense, basically complementing their two very unique skill sets. Yeah, man, that's something to be excited about. And again, they get to practice this against the likes of the Wizards and the Brooklyn Nets and the Chicago Bulls. It's great for them anyway.
That is ultimately, I think, going to be the major differentiator because the other stuff will come and go, I think. And I think to that point, we were talking about them all doom and gloom last week, they won 4 in a row since we last talked about them.
Yeah.
That could easily flip the other way at any moment because I think you're right. I think it is funny that Doc is playing the young guys and it's AJ Green and Jackson who are 23 and 24 who are basically fully formed young guys at this point, but we'll give them credit for at least moving past the Connaughton model and going to at least the younger model. I think Brook Lopez has looked pretty good of late, shooting the ball really well and just looks a little bit more spry and just in the flow of things defensively in a way that I think is going to matter. How much of that is just things are flowing on the offense is just giving him more time to get set on the defensive end. Who knows? But I think you're right, Waz. I think it's is the chemistry Dame and Giannis are showing right now going to carry over? They're making a big old stink about it. They are telling everyone that their chemistry is better and look how good our chemistry is. And have you seen the chemistry that we're putting together? We'll see ultimately. One thing I think is an interesting wrinkle though is Giannis is taking way more mid-range jumpers. And we talked in the past about how Giannis might be a little too set in his ways. That's one way where I think it's almost in the Anthony Davis mold where he's adding a little bit more of a dimension to him, but it's not the full-blown, let me step outside, shoot threes, electric, let me just completely change my game thing. If he could add that, it paces him throughout the season, and I also think it gives him a little bit more of a threat when they build the wall against him. It gives defenses something more to encounter. And if he gets that in there, maybe that's a little bit of a wrinkle, plus whatever he gets from Dame, where it can make them a little bit more dynamic. And if anything, maybe pace out how much the chemistry matters between them, because he himself is pacing himself out and giving him something new to throw out there.
Yeah, Waz, as a Giannis jumper skeptic, what would you say if I told you that Giannis is attempting the 4th most mid-range shots in the entire NBA right now? And also, what would you say if I told you he's hitting 48% of those shots? Basically, DeRozan, Devin Booker numbers right now.
Chris Middleton numbers.
I'm personally not sold on it, but I'm not an idiot. I can't argue with accuracy and efficiency.
You've tried before.
No. He's never been this efficient before.
No, I agree.
His efficiency is up there, and if he's maintaining it, then I gotta eat a big fat old dummy sandwich. I was an idiot for questioning it. If this efficiency continues, especially at this pace, I can't argue with that. If Giannis is proving me and other Giannis jump shot skeptics wrong, then, that's a big development. And I think the reason why that matters is because, you can't just subsist on barreling into 5 guys all game, every game, 82 games, then do it in the playoffs again against the best teams. Physically, that's a big demand, right? And to me, I thought, offsetting that would just be letting other guys do stuff and Giannis picking his spots when he can be mega aggressive. But if the offset is that he's going to have an accurate jump shot from mid-range, then have at it, Giannis. Do it. I'm not mad at that at all.
I think all of these elements are important in the way that you outlined, though, Justin, which is the chemistry between Giannis and Dame is clearly really critical to the Bucks' overall success. But if you have Giannis hitting these jumpers, if you have these role players chipping in their games, if you have a resurgent Brook Lopez, you're taking some of the pressure off Dame and Giannis having to be perfect together all the time. And the more you can do that, the more you can get, like, their starting lineup is finally getting stops for maybe the first time all season. Those are really critical developments for them. Anything to kind of take some of the edge off and make it so that every time Giannis goes to the bench, it doesn't feel like the team might fall apart, I think ultimately really serves just like the overall psychological state of this team.
Winning solves a lot. You know, if you're winning the game, you could point to the one play where it's like, oh, this is a representation of what we could be, as opposed to harping on the 4 to 5 plays that probably lost you the game. So I'm encouraged more than I was about a week ago, but we'll see. I'm curious, who should we go with the players here? Because it's a real deep cut of side dishes here. Waz, why don't you go with yours first?
So I ended up having a combination dish here, guys, because I want to talk about both RJ Barrett and Gradey Dick.
Okay.
Because I think they've both been pretty interesting. RJ Barrett, like, my ultimate dream of him becoming a sort of updated Ron Artest type physical defender, downhill guy, you know, can't completely sag off of his jump shot, secondary playmaking. That was my ultimate dream for him. It never fully materialized. The defensive impact has just never happened. It's unfortunate because I thought he had the tools and the physicality. It never happened. However, when the Knicks shipped him out last year, it was just like, look, on ball, like, yeah, we get it. You have some nice, decent juice, but Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, they got that. Like, we don't need you to do that, and you don't guard. And Thibodeau is like, what the fuck? Like, this is not our kind of player. And so he was put into the deal for OG Anunoby, who obviously filled more needs for what the Knicks needed at the time. However, in Toronto, I think he's been allowed to spread his wings more, obviously, because of the circumstances, not just the roster construction, but, you know, Scotty Barnes being out and all of that. And obviously he's averaging a career high in points, career high in assists by, like, you know, 30%, which I think is eye-opening, like his playmaking game, which was a big problem at first in New York. He could have a bit of a tunnel vision to see his playmaking evolve in that way. And then, of course, he's having a career high year at the free throw line, which I thought was always going to be a differentiator for RJ Barrett. And so it's just nice that, look, man, by the time they shipped him out of New York, even the most optimist RJ Knick fans that I knew were like, we're ready. It's time. We're glad he's gone. And so to see him blossom this way has been amazing. And Gradey Dick diversifying his offense this year, not just being a purely catch and shoot 3-point guy. He's getting to the cup. He's 4x'd his free throw attempts this year per game. That's insane. You know, like, he's getting to the line, getting to the cup, even taking a few mid-rangers off the bounce. Him diversifying his game is showing that, like, oh, this is a nice piece. Gradey Dick is potentially going to be a guy that helps be one of the building blocks to the future of whatever the Raptors are. So I wanted to combine those two guys because of my history with RJ and just being legitimately impressed with how Gradey Dick has taken a step in a different direction.
What if the Raptors just built the same exact team that they had before, but instead of 6'6" guys who only play defense and can't shoot, they have only 6'6" guys who can shoot but struggle defensively?
Yeah. Because
it seems like that's what's happening here. And I ultimately think, was that this is a Scotty Barnes backdoor conversation, because God forbid we talk about the Raptors without talking about Scotty Barnes' progress. I thought it was curious that in the starting lineup yesterday, they listed Scotty Barnes as the point guard, but on the first defensive possession, he was guarding Evan Mobley. And so I was like, oh, this feels a little Ben Simmons-y here. But I do think the biggest question with Barnes coming into the season was how much of a scorer he is. The shooting obviously is a big factor, but can he be your go-to scorer? I am dubious of that fact, but if you surround him with a lot of scoring, can he be the point power forward who orchestrates with all of these separate options? Can he be the table setter? Can he be more, I don't want to say Siakam, because he already kind of vaulted past him in terms of like where he is as an offensive player, in terms of progress, in terms of shooting. But can he be just more of the point guard and let all those other guys do that, and he could just get into the mix?
Yeah, I think the best case scenario for Scotty Barnes is that kind of facilitation. And ultimately, the Raptors really haven't a chance to see all three of their creators out there together. Emmanuel Quickley's also missed the majority of the season so far. RJ, as we said, has been such a key playmaker because Barnes and Quickley were both out. You put
Where's
all those
Pirtle in that conversation?
Well, he's being enabled by RJ Barrett, among other things. That's the pick and roll combo of my
Empowered
dreams.
by Andre Barrett.
Completely. Like
Rest in power.
Well, I want to talk about that part specifically because RJ, in terms of his playmaking, which I do think is the part of his game that has really, really popped this year, has been so good at creating offense at the basket. He's always been a driver, maybe more one direction than the other sometimes. That has balanced out a little bit. And overall, he's just one of the best assist creators for baskets, like shots at the basket in the restricted area. A lot of that is pick and roll. A lot of that's finding guys on cuts. A lot of that's just keeping his head up, was in the way that you were saying, like he did have that sort of blinders effect as a young player. And there were so many parts of watching him run into the same walls over and over and over again as a Knick that he now feels sort of liberated from. And he does feel like a totally different kind of player. And if RJ is that guy, and Scotty Barnes is a facilitator, and Emmanuel Quickley is back healthy, that's the core of something. I don't know where that group ultimately leads you, and maybe you still need that sort of influx of transcendent talent. Maybe that's Cooper Flagg's music. We'll see how that goes this season. But ultimately, I think there is something here, and I agree that Gradey Dick has kind of made himself a part of it by... I may push back even a little bit, Justin, on the characterization that like these guys all are a little lacking defensively. I think Gradey Dick is actually a pretty competitive defender, like not a world beater by any means.
He's competitive. Okay.
Look,
he's a white guy. We get it.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, but we got to start somewhere.
You're starting somewhere, and what you want when your shooters actually have length is that they're actually going to commit and try on defense and work for it and make themselves into more well-rounded players. And I think the way the Gradey Dick has done that has, yes, been getting to the line, been getting into mid-range, been involved in a wider variety of actions. It's also been turning himself into not a complete liability on defense. And that is a thing that I think is worth noting.
They're, 4-13 right now? So we should pump the brakes just ever so slightly. But I do like it long-term and how it scales next to Barnes. Because I agree. I think if Barrett can be effective as a creator off of these secondary actions, I think it fits the entire vision that they have with Barnes being the focal point of what they have. I also think if he's not that guy, if Quickley is not that guy, it opens up spots for maybe these high draft picks that are coming in. It seems like there are a lot of bigger wing scorers, electric offensive player types. I think you could easily slot in there. And I think it's more about a bigger discussion about you want your superstar player, obviously, to be dominant in different factors, but you also want him to not take enough off the table that you have to fill it in other areas. If Barnes is checking all the boxes, it provides you more flexibility with the other players around him. And so if he is an excellent defensive player who's a facilitator, you could fill offensive players around him, which are actually easier probably to find than 3-and-D types or guys that need to be a little bit more nuanced. And so I like him as like the foundation for something. I'm still a little bit more mixed on Barrett. I think he's had an awesome start. I think he could be a guy within this team, but I wouldn't lock him in as like a surefire. He's going to be a 2 or 3 in the vision for this team going forward. We'll see. But I kind of like where they are from this point forward if they can keep adding electric offensive players on top of what they have.
Yeah, it's not that RJ has solved everything about how to approach the game or that he plays a spotless brand of basketball or that even for all the playmaking gains that he's made, that he's all of a sudden a lead option in a way that feels really compelling and unarguable. It's just that he's gone from this player who was genuinely very frustrating to watch into one that is actually exciting and one that is actually moving the needle for the Raptors and is actually fulfilling needs that team has had while other guys have been out. We all want to see what this team looks like when everybody's healthy. We all want to see what this core could eventually be. But I'm with you. Like nothing about RJ's game screams, oh, this is an immovable piece for the future of the Toronto Raptors. He's a really good player who's a part of this mix now, and we'll see where that goes.
If anything, the efficiency on the scoring is virtually the same. Like scoring-wise, he's kind of the same. He's just added the playmaking.
Yes, it's the playmaking, and again, a slight uptick in the free throws. And look, for me, it's like he signed for his rookie extension less than a max. And I think he's playing to that level, right? Like he's playing like a very high quality starter. And if RJ in a future scenario for this team or another, where it's like, look, we don't count on him to do any of this scoring or distributing or shooting, but he's at a level that he can be competent around pretty much anything at this point. And that's what I think is important. Like, I think RJ could be, I think foundational is like, like what's Derek White to the Celtics success? It's not foundational.
Well, once you're a Sam Adams guy, I think you're part of the lifeblood of the organization.
Fabric of the city. Yeah.
But it's an important, he could be something important to something, that's a high level of winning. And so that's what I think is nice about watching RJ, to a guy who, like, I've been up and down, but like feel really invested in what he's been doing, because I felt like he unfairly got killed for not being as good as Ja Morant and freaking Zion Williamson, which is tough. That's just a tough position. But I like the player that he's turning himself into.
Might be the last guy standing out of that crew. So
facts.
We'll see. I agree with what you're saying. But to keep on this jag about youngish scorers trying to find themselves, let's talk about Shaedon Sharpe. Obviously in my backyard. Surprise.
Yeah, I actually thought about picking Shaedon Sharpe, but I figured I'm just like not allowed to pick Blazers because you're going to shoehorn them into every conversation.
I feel like I've tempered my enthusiasm of late. Like I've kind of sat on my hands about Sharpe because he seemed like he was onto something. He had those back-to-back 30-point games, which in Portland I was in attendance for both of those, and I was like, pretty damn good. I will say this, like, I'm trying to rack my brains. I can't think of a smoother athlete that I've seen live than him. Just everything he does just seems cooler as a result. I don't know how much you guys are following like skateboarding, but like there's a certain type of skateboarder who has just like great style. Like there's the guys that jump over things, like all the stairs, and like they're the bold ones. And then you have like the technically precise ones, but then you have the guys who just like do things and it just looks cool as shit. It's like the Eric Costin types. And Shaedon is the type of guy who does that because every movement he makes, it seems like he's like doing it thoughtfully, like he already planned this out. But if anything, he's just so smooth, like improvising and fluid as an athlete. It looks good. And I also think it adds to his benefit because then like he'll just like turn his body and square up as a shooter like more quickly on step backs than I think other players do. So there's that. But
can we do a whole pod that's just guys who do things and look cool as shit? And we just talk about that for an hour? I would honestly be into it.
It kind of is this podcast, if we're being honest. So I think he's on the verge of a potential breakthrough of being the guy that I think a lot of Blazers fans are hoping for. I think the problem is the past two games have been a little bit more mixed, and I think part of that is Sharpe perhaps not being as much of a playmaker or really any playmaking. Yeah. He's just really kind of tunnel vision, does his own thing, needs to develop that end of it. But you have seen him do better next to pass first point guards than he does against one Anthony Simons. Even Scoot Henderson, for instance, has kind of downshifted into this like team first mode where he's just trying to get everyone else involved and orchestrate as opposed to go for his own, in part because I think like he's just trying to make anything work. And it's worked to Sharpe's benefit because then Sharpe gets to do what he wants. Simon, it's a little bit more complex because they are pretty similar types where they're both like electric scoring guards who the playmaking and the facilitating aspect comes kind of second nature to them. And there are times like in the second game against Houston the other night where it could look good. There was like this one slip that Simon had off of like a screen for Sharpe, and it was like a very quick hit for a three. And I was like, that's pretty good. But other times it does look redundant. And so it does get into like kind of a backdoor Simons conversation where it's like, I think Simons is the better player at point guard, but I think Sharpe works better with pass first point guards, not only Scoop, but Delano Banton. And so what does that mean? Simons hasn't played particularly well of late. He had a really good game against Houston the other night. But I don't know. I think like in the big conversation with Portland about who do you trade, who do you keep, I think you keep the veterans until they step on some of the developing young guys. And I think Simmons, unfortunately, might be one of them.
I share your enthusiasm for Shaedon Sharpe doing cool shit. If I can transpose some of the RJ Barrett conversation onto this one, like it is very apparent that he is on the verge of a breakthrough, but to what? Like what kind of a player can Shaedon Sharpe be? Because you do see these flashes from him. And I agree with you in terms of the overall sort of rhythm of his game. Like he's playing with the kinds of changes in pace that you need to have to really be a high level factor off the dribble, right? He looks, he's this unbelievable athlete. He has the bursts, and yet he's using it to get into spots and keep his balance. And it does feel very controlled. It does feel very balanced. You can see like a year over year difference in how he's creating in the pick and roll, off the dribble, manufacturing stuff for himself. You also see teammates all over the floor waving at him, begging him to pass the ball. And I don't think it's just a matter of like, oh, this guy, it's not natural to him to make plays. I'm just not sure he's ever going to be that kind of player in the way that like Anthony Simons has kind of forced himself as a round peg into a square hole and made himself into a semi-functional lead guard playmaker. I don't think Shaedon Sharpe has that in him per se, or even necessarily wants to be that. And if he's not that, he's just a guy who puts up a lot of points and looks really good doing it, and maybe can be really efficient doing that someday. But what is that player? I don't really know.
He's got to pair. To become something more special, he's got to pair that with like guarding his position well, or something else has to come of this. Because I just looked this up while y'all was talking. He's at a 27% usage, which is that's the real deal. Like, yo, he's taking over the offense.
They're featuring him. Like, they're clearing out running stuff for him.
2.5 assists per game.
Honestly, I thought it was lower.
That's comical. That's, he's got a lot of Michael Porter Jr. in him, in that sense. But I think he hasn't played a lot. He only played 30 games last season. It's the very beginning of the season. This stuff, if it doesn't come natural to you, you have to work on it, right? Definitely. Like you have to put the pain in to get results out of your playmaking and reading defenses and getting off the ball quicker. Like I think about somebody like Donovan Mitchell, man. It took Kenny Atkinson to get in there and preach get off the ball quicker. Not that Donovan Mitchell was ever this level of chucker, but he's had problems in the past seeing the floor more. And it comes a new coach, new philosophy, and talking this guy into being more willing to get off the rock to the point where, they lose to the Celtics. And he's like, yo, part of the problem is I was getting into my older ways and not getting off of it quick enough and ISOing too much and doing that. And this is like how long into his career that he's becoming this guy. So I don't think I'm not going to foreclose on the opportunity the idea that this guy can change it up and diversify the way he attacks defenses. But yeah, right now, he's a chucker. Allen Iverson would be proud of him.
That honestly, all totally fair. I think, Justin, for me, what it is like when you are a young team in Portland's position, and eventually you do have to start making bets on these guys, and you have to start saying we're going to start shifting a little more in the Simons direction, a little more in the Shaedon Sharpe direction, a little bit more in the Scoot Henderson direction, whatever it ends up being, or whatever combination of those guys you think can work. That's easier to do when, as a player, you can do multiple things. And right now, Shaedon Sharpe does one thing, and he does it maybe two if you want to incorporate like pure spot shooting, because I do think he's pretty good at that too. But really, he is just a scorer, and that I think can be limiting in terms of projecting face of the franchise potential or foundational piece potential.
I think it's not as much of a concern because they are building a pretty solid foundation defensively. Like they're actually a pretty competent defense. And I think if you're going to have Klingon in the middle of that, and I think he's basically supplanted Ayton as the starter at this point when Ayton is able to get back out there.
That's insane.
I think Klingon is going to be a very good rim protector and rebounder. He had a game the other night where he had 0 points and 19 rebounds. And so he's like almost doing a lot of the dirty work that you would want from the supplementary players. I also think Grant probably fits what they're building in a way where he's like would be tougher to trade at this point. And so if you have Kamara, Grant, Klingon defensively, it allows you to be a little bit more offensive leaning with the other two positions. I just think like Simons and Sharpe probably overlap a little too much because you want somebody at the very least to get things moving. And to Simon's credit, I think he's tried to be more in facilitator mode in order to make it work. I think a lot of times that leads to him just maybe like stepping out, passing it to Sharpe and just watching because there's nothing really else for him to do. So I don't know. I think if you had to pick one, I think you go Sharpe. But again, like I think it's that classic issue they keep coming into conflict with, which is the older guy is better. And how do you play the younger guy who's worse if you don't know if that guy is the guy for the future? I'm actually higher on Sharpe. I think a lot of the tunnel vision stuff can be worked out. And if anything, if he is the scorer next to, for instance, if they get a high draft pick and it's Dylan Harper, who's more of a playmaker type, he could play off of that sort of player really well. But that player has to be the facilitator plus a scorer, and Sharpe can just be the guy running off pin downs and actions. He could be more of like a shooter who can drive the ball whenever is necessary. He's more the second side guy.
Yeah, as a second side guy, I think that could really work for him. It just depends on how they want to use him in the offense, who's ultimately around him. As you say, like, do you have the point guard who can make sense of that sort of alignment? Because if Shaedon Sharpe is the guy running your offense, and there have been plenty of times this season where he is that for Portland, your offense goes one place. And that place, to his credit, is often to the rim. Like, he's getting downhill, he's turning the corner, he's doing really well. But it's gonna ride with Shaedon Sharpe. And I want a more diverse overall picture for my offense than that. I love what he's doing individually. I'm just trying to figure out what the team context is.
Listen, they're 7-10. They're just playing above their skis right now. They would be the really 7th seed in the Eastern Conference if it ended today. But I agree with what Waz is saying. I think if he is going to be second side guy, then he has to be more of a defender because then he has to do more than just.
And we should say he's not a defender.
No,
not a rebounder. No. Honestly, I think I would feel better about the trajectory if he were turning the ball over more, trying to make feeds. Like if he were trying to spray out and it just like the timing was off, the rhythm was off, the read wasn't quite there, I think I would feel a different way. But the fact that he's really attacking and the turnovers that he gets are mostly just like mishandling the ball or getting picked or driving into a crowd, it just points to him being like a very straightforward player in a way that I would love to see him evolve from.
I will say maybe this is me just being there live and being overly enamored with like the sight of it. But like, I do think he's operating on a level that even like NBA athletes aren't. And I think like I will take a bet on that like 10 times.
How could you not? Like it's a worthy endeavor.
Yeah. Speaking of another young guy working his way into the mix, Rob, I think the floor is yours for your player.
Yeah, we're talking leaps today, apparently. The Magic are one of the best teams in the East. Franz Wagner looks like a star. The defense is elite. The role players are getting the job done. And our guy, Anthony Black, is really, really starting to pop. I think he can still be pretty up and down as a player, but you can see, I think overall, a really profound difference in the way he's been able to create, specifically in the half court. He's always been a really good open floor player, transition player. You give him even a semi-break, he's going to weave his way through and find something to do with the ball, something creative, something productive in terms of where a possession can go. But I think he's doing a lot more than just revving up the Magic right now. And he's starting to look a lot more like a real NBA point guard who can make things happen when it does slow down, when everything gets harder. And that's been really awesome to see.
Yeah, these tall guys, dare I say it, a la Luka Doncic, who have the playmaking chops.
The first Anthony Black, Luka Doncic comp in human history.
Well, it's more about like when these guys are turning the corner on a pick and roll, they just have a better line of sight on the other guys on the floor than the shorter guys do. Like, they're just better. The LeBrons, the Lukas, the Nikola Jokic's. Like, they can see over people. And this dude being 6'7" and having the instincts that he does for playmaking, I think that's what's really been popping to me is like, man, he's actually using his size to accentuate what's being asked of him in a way that I think has staying power and is something to build off of. That's what's really incredible to me. Because again, like Luka has the vision, but it's that he's so big and rangy that helps him a lot in a way that, look, he could have all the freaking court vision he wants. At 5'11", you're not getting those passes off and over all these lengthy ass athletic dudes, you know, even if you have the foresight to do so.
Yeah, did you guys see the pass in the Clippers game where he was like driving and then he like left hand one-handed it all the way to the opposite corner in the right
Hell yeah.
for a corner three. I was like, what the fuck is that?
It was metal as hell.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. I think the size is there. I think the vision is there. My only concern is just the shooting, and
Sure.
he's gotten more aggressive about putting it up when defenders go under on him, and that's great to see because you only want him to be respectable on that end as a starting block. I think the problem is it still feels like teams are pretty aggressively going under, and he's a little bit more hesitant than I was expecting. But clearly a player who has great feel for when he's out there, clearly having a dramatic effect on that second unit. And we talked about him a couple days ago, Rob, where I was like, maybe get him in the starting unit until Paolo gets back, because he just seems to have a way of getting things in motion that I think would benefit Franz in particular. Not that he needs it these days, but I think if he had more of a head of steam, got him going, I think that he would fit really well there.
Yeah, I think it is telling that when guys have been out, whether it's Paolo obviously missing time right now, when Franz was sick earlier in the season, Anthony Black has been a little bit of the escape hatch for them. You know, like put him out there in case of emergency, rely on his playmaking, even betting on the idea that teams aren't going to guard him as aggressively at the 3-point line, but using him to keep the offense moving when the ball does come his way. He needs to make more threes. Like, you're right. He's just going to have to do that at some point. And I'm encouraged by, I think, two things. One, the frequency with which he's taking them, as you said, not just hunting when teams go under, but overall, when the ball swings to him, not being shy about taking those shots that the offense, frankly, needs him to take. And also the fact that his teammates are trusting him to take them in the first place, including in some huge moments. Like, part of being as essential as he's been to the Magic is he's been out there to close in a lot of these games. And he's there in the corner, and Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner, like, those guys are swinging him the ball and expecting him to hit the shot. We'll see if they ultimately fall or not enough over the course of his career to matter in that way. But that's ultimately going to be more of a tertiary part of his game. It is going to be more about the flow and the playmaking. It is going to be about the disruption that he can cause on defense. Like, the Magic have a lot of really fun combinations of players. The Jonathan Isaac, Anthony Black muck shit up combo off the bench, super fun to watch. Do those lineups score at all? I don't know. Not really. Sometimes they really get stuck in the mud, but they force so many turnovers. They blow up plays, even involving superstar level players. It's really fun to watch, and it's really disruptive in a way that I think points to something that can be really valuable for the Magic.
And that to me is what's important, right? It's like, we know how important shooting is in the modern NBA, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, teams are taking 53s a game. We get it. You still have to have other components to what you're doing. And the fact that he so beautifully fits into their defensive mentality and physicality, and this guy's not afraid to take the assignment of the best perimeter player and guard him on an island. Like, he's long, he's big, he's instinctual. His defense, man, is just a joy to watch for a guy who's only 20 years old.
Yeah.
To already have the mentality of, you know, I'm a dog out there. I'm here to harass people on defense. I love that about what he's doing. So yeah, man, you combine an instinct for playmaking, a willingness to get off the ball, and, you know, his size, vision with tenacity on defense. Yeah, man, the get off my lawn DNA in me, yeah, that gets me excited.
Where do we see long-term for him, though? Because is the goal maybe to eventually supplant KCP, like when he ages out of the contract, like he's the point guard in name, but Suggs is the off guard? Like, is that the trajectory, Rob?
I think if that's going to be the case, he is going to have to hit threes at a pretty high level. Like, if you're going to play with Franz and Paolo full time, you got to hit spot up shots at a higher rate than he currently does. So he does make sense as a sort of hybrid guard. Like, he can play either spot a little bit. He can obviously come off the bench as he's been doing. Looking down the line, by the time he's 25, yeah, I think you hope that he can be a really legit driver of your offense in a more significant way. Right now, he gets to be the wild card and the fun kind of counter speed, and he is becoming good at that. So let's maybe start there and see how it goes over the course of the season. But yeah, like he's a hard player to pin down long term for exactly that reason.
Yeah, I wonder if he could maybe, I don't know, be like an Iguodala type of threat from three, where it's like, you know, he makes them often enough that at times defensive have to kind of respect it. Iguodala's a low bar from 3. You know, I just don't know that he's ever going to be like good at it. But can he be manageable? You know, around some high level other offensive players that he's complimenting. You know, the time remains to be seen on that.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the takes now, and I'm gonna go first here. Everyone holds their breath in anticipation. What am I gonna do?
What do you got?
I was gonna go with the bolder one, but I'll spin it back here just because.
Why?
Running on time. Well, you know, I want to really hit that one hard, and now it's going to be probably a separate podcast. The 2-game set in the same location against the same team is an awful idea, and we need to abolish it immediately. It is such a awful experience for fans. So if you're a fan of a home team, you're going to the game on Tuesday, you see the Minnesota Timberwolves. Great. Anthony Edwards is in town. I can't wait to see the Wolves. This is exciting. The next day, what happens? Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves yet again. What fan is like actually wanting to go to see the same experience twice? When you watch the Shogun episode, Rob, do you want to just roll it back immediately the next day and watch the same exact Shogun episode? It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it seems like a classic NBA thing where they're acknowledging that the schedule is a problem, that guys are feeling the physical effects of the travel, of the back-to-backs, all that stuff. So what they do is they come up with a half measure that ultimately makes the product worse. And so you're acknowledging that there needs to be a solution here, but you're actually coming up with a thing that actually makes me want to not tune in, as opposed to doing the most logical thing, which would be to scale back the schedule. I keep coming back to this entire thing where it's like they're constantly contorting themselves into knots rather than just doing what everyone agrees would make the product better. If you're a casual fan, if you're a hardcore fan, everyone is like, get me fewer games, and they just refuse to do it. I don't understand it. And so we have these stupid games where I'm just watching the same thing back to back. It's like, no one wants this. It sucks. That's the take.
Hard agree.
That was the lesser take.
No notes. Hard agree. Terrible.
I'm looking at the schedule. I'm realizing two things stuck in Justin's craw. Apparently, one of them was seeing Anthony Edwards twice in a row. I don't really see the problem with that personally. I'm thinking that the moment that really broke you was the October 25th and October 27th back sequence with the Pelicans, Blazers Pelicans 2 games in a row. I think that's what might have sucked your soul out a little bit.
I didn't go to the first one of those.
Okay, good.
We were in LA, but they had a 2-game set. Oh, it was the Timberwolves. I didn't go to the second game.
That's what I'm talking about.
I didn't.
I don't need to see this again.
I don't need to see this.
But this is your problem. Like, you're thinking of it as watching the same episode of Shogun over again. Really, what this is this is the binge model. I want to watch the next installment of this budding rivalry. Not in this case, because the Blazers and the Wolves don't have a rivalry. But I want to see the tensions rising and escalating between these teams as they get a little mini series going.
That never works. Sometimes guys get into tussles and then it carries into the next game and it's just like a little bit more spicy, but it never just like ratchets it up to where it's a different experience. They even go as far as, so the Blazers had a 2-game set against the Rockets in Houston. They changed the jerseys the next night to be like, oh, this is a completely new thing. And the Edwards experience, I think, is like an instructive one, because there's also a whole part of this where like older players are getting load managed on one of these games. And if you're a fan, you have to pick which one in advance, which happened to me last year when I thought I was seeing Nikola Jokic. I ended up seeing Aaron Gordon as the starting center, just like against Scoot Henderson and a bunch of just like bench players. Edwards is the classic case where it's like, if he's in a certain mode at this point in the season where he's like, he's struggling a little bit. He hasn't been like the takeoff top 5 MVP candidate that we thought he was. Like, I get 2 of those games as opposed to seeing him now and getting a different experience later when he might have figured everything out. And so not only is like the team repetitive and redundant, you also get the same sort of performance from the guys you want to see, as opposed to the variety of early season edition and a late season.
Let me piggyback off that while we're talking to Anthony Edwards, because I have a related take, which is, look, we're barely into the season, not even a quarter of the way through. It is November 25th as we're recording this podcast. Based on everything that we have seen so far, I just don't think the Wolves are going anywhere this season. I just look at that team. I see, yes, they can compete. They can compete with some of the best teams in the league sometimes. They can give the Celtics a run for their money. Night to night, the vibes are really bad. The flow of the team is not good. The defense is not up to the standards it was last season. And they are staring down a Western Conference that is in no way forgiving to them for having even a bad month or so. And so, yes, there's plenty of time to right the ship. There's obviously a lot of season to be played for these guys to work out their habits, to find the combinations. I look at the roster. I see a combination of a couple of wild card spots in the rotation, Mike Conley chief among them. Like, what is Mike Conley going to be able to give them over the course of this season? I see players who don't necessarily know how to work together, and maybe that's worked together yet. Maybe Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert figure it out over time. Maybe Naz Reid, who I think has had kind of a weird season so far, finds his place in the rotation in a more meaningful way. Maybe this is a team that figures out how to do and replicate some of the things that like Kyle Anderson was giving them last season and may have gone unnoticed in lots of ways. Maybe they figure all that stuff out. I'm just not sure they have enough room for error in the West to have any kind of run. And so I'm looking at this team now, and what they read like to me on November 25th is a team that either like makes the play-in and gets bounced because they don't take a game seriously enough, or they play with their food, or they make the first round and they're a quick out. Like, that's what the Wolves feel like right now to me. And coming off of the run that they had last year, I'm mystified how we got here.
I think this actually happened the first Rudy year, where Ant was taking all of these jump shots because he just couldn't figure out how to get into the lane, and people were asking him about it, and they didn't want to be. He was trying to be nice, but he's like, the lane is clogged.
Yeah,
I don't know how to do this yet. And I think there's an element of that happening. And then, too, it's Julius Randle. Like, I get it. He's a good player. But I'm sure you guys saw that clip going around. I forget who they were playing the other day. Rudy had a guy completely sealed, like literally put the guy under the basket. And Randle looked him off. And I think just turned the ball over. Instead of just depositing a pass to Rudy. Again, he's not Shaq down there. But he can finish one-footers. Right. Instead of just passing him the ball. And yes, sometimes. And that dynamic, I think, is going to be some time for that to work itself out. And again, Randle is angling for a new deal, y'all. Like, that shit matters. And I don't know that they have it in him to be like, yo, all right, man, we'll make you a bench unit guy, a 6-man type. Because, like, 6-man types don't get paid, y'all. So, I think there's a lot of kinks to be worked out. But yeah, I've given up hope on the Wolves this season, figuring something out and getting any. Because there was this idea like, Naz Reid and Julius Randle, they're going to basically 90% of Karl Anthony Towns' production. It's like, nah, it doesn't work like that. There's a dynamic to the offense that just is completely removed when you don't have Cat. And, he had figured out how to become a decent defensive 4-man. And yeah, I'm in agreement with you.
I still am bullish because I see the offensive potential of the new additions. And the fact that DiVincenzo hasn't played particularly well, I think, is a sticking point in this discussion. I think they even have a level to go when he plays better. Again, I think Randle has been fine by and large. I don't think he's much of an issue. And so is the problem that the pieces don't fit and that there's something just wrong with the mix here? Or do they not have the safeguards that Edwards had used in years past in order to stop the bleeding from happening? I think you hear Kyle Anderson being such a big part of the locker room and just like on the on-floor execution. So is it something like that where they need to find the guys who will plug the holes when needed, where it's more of like not necessarily chemistry, but they had come to rely on a certain guy to provide a certain thing and they just haven't found that, versus the team is a mess, this version doesn't work, they needed Cat to do XYZ? I kind of think it is more of the former than the latter.
It could end up being that. I think what's concerning to me about Kyle Anderson being such a prominent part of this discussion so earlier in the season is that if you look at their roster, there are a lot of guys who do one or two discrete things quite well. There aren't a lot of players on that roster who are good connective tissue players.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a weird fit to begin with, and you're trying to amass all of these individual skills, like specialist is too strong for the collection of players that the Wolves have, but guys who have like pretty singular focuses, foci, in terms of how they play.
What?
I don't. Isn't the
that a
plural
word?
of isn't the plural of focus?
I'm gonna let the
foci?
editor handle this one, man.
You tell us, man.
I'm gonna let the audience decide on that one. Whatever it is that they're doing, like there are a lot of players on this team who are very straightforward in the way that they approach it, and not enough players on the team who are kind of comprehensive and filling gaps and like who are able to modulate how they play based on the person next to them. That concerns me. There isn't a lot of versatility in that way, and if you don't have that, what you're left with is one of the most transcendent individual talents in the league in Anthony Edwards, and a bunch of guys who should be able to work together, but so far have not really proven that they can on a consistent enough basis. So that worries me.
That's where I think you can ding Randall, because especially if Conley is being emphasized, if he's not playing the back-to-backs, is just not as integral to what's happening. You need Randall to be the connector in a way that probably Anderson and even Towns was like good at just like getting out of the way. If that's where Randall is probably a little bit more me first in a way that doesn't show up in some of the data. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So, all right, Waz, what's your take?
So, to me, for my money, there's like a set group of the NBA's greatest players, right? We do this GOAT talk, Mike, LeBron. To me, it's
Connect.
Mike, LeBron, Dalton Connect, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yep.
Those are the three greats, the three greatest. If somebody wanted to make a legitimate argument for one of those three to be like, this is the greatest NBA player ever, I think you could make a compelling case for each of those three guys. I think just nipping at the edges of that are Magic and Russell.
Oh, God.
And
know
I
where
think
this
the
is going.
person who is going to be added to this list, y'all, is Nikola fucking Jokic, man. I'm telling y'all, I am telling you guys. Obviously, he's already won 3 MVPs. When it comes to these fucking all-in-one advanced stats, he's got these records in those categories where it's like he's clearly the NBA's best player. This man has won 3 MVPs and he is now having his best season ever. It's insane. And there is no sign of slowing down, of abatement, y'all. This guy is just incredible. I get it. He's averaging the triple-double. He's threatening the first ever triple crown in the history of NBA basketball. Like, nobody's ever even thought you could do something like that. Lead the league in scoring, assist, and rebounds.
Oh, if he does that, Justin has to come to a live show on a horse or something. Like
I'm down for that.
Gotta work.
It's just watching him this year be, again, he's already won 3 MVPs, guys, and he's playing his best basketball ever. Like, I know a lot of times you're just like, oh, Jokic is looking like he might be top 15. Some people might get freaky and say, oh, he's looking like he's top 10. No, I'm telling y'all, he's going to the Mike, LeBron, Magic, Kareem level, y'all. This is how great of a player he is. And I was reading Hollinger this morning. The freaking point differential of like 34 freaking points when he's on or off the court.
I literally told this to you on our last podcast.
Oh, yeah, you did it too. Whatever.
And
Sorry,
I would
Where
like to
have
say,
you been?
it was big of me to not point out that their center rotation is so trash that like even if Peyton
matter.
Watson was starting at center, this
Doesn't
would be
matter.
like a 20-point differential. But
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
okay.
I'm getting takes off here. Anyway.
I'm glad that we are now a semi-video podcast, because I need anyone who's just listening to this show. You need to go to YouTube. You need to open up your Spotify app. You need to pull up the video. I need you to find the little shimmy that Waz did as he was saying that Nikola was getting freaky. It was really something to behold.
I'm just saying, man, this guy, I'm running out of superlatives, man. Like, he is just incredible, singular experience night after night, that he could just be this great. this consistently, man. And again, we talked about it in the beginning of the year where it's just like, yo, this team is lacking in role players and all of this stuff. And, the shooting is bad and all of this shit. Maybe it's just going to have to be Jokic just completely decides, I'm taking over everything. I'm doing everything. And what has he gone out and done? I'm just going to do everything. I'm going to lead the league in boards. I'm going to be up right there with assists. I'm going to lead the league in score. Like, it's insane, man. This guy's headed for top 5 Mount Rushmore level Justin Verrier.
You know what this is? Earlier in the season, we caught Jokic on a downswing after they'd lost the first 2 games, and we expressed doubt. And when I say we, I mean all of us. And now Waz is now overcompensating for the fact that he ever doubted for a second that Nikola Jokic is that guy.
Yeah.
Never doubted.
Well, to be a proper religious movement, someone needs to rise again. You really need the resurrection narrative for it to work.
Yeah, I know I'm the chief. Me and Rob together, and my man Michael Pina, we're the chief Jokic propagandists in the NBA media, man. But this season has done nothing to dissuade me of this guy's just ultimate greatness. Love that guy. Shouts to Jokic, greatest of all time.
So we've had an Anthony Black to Luka Doncic comp. We've had a Nikola Jokic to Bill Russell, at least in the Pantheon sense comp.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. I think this one is probably closer to being true, honestly. Like, Jokic is probably closer to cracking, like, ultimately in terms of trajectory, what he's been able to do so far, assuming he continues to play. And that's really the variable with him, I think, is not just how good can he be in a season like this.
He doesn't miss games.
But no,
either.
not that. But how long does he want to do this? Like, how long does Nikola Jokic want to be this guy? And how long, to be fair, are the Denver Nuggets going to position him where he has to do this every night? Because this is not his ideal form of playing basketball.
It's my ideal.
If they keep trotting him out there for 39 minutes a game, like, he's probably not going to last much longer, if only because he's just sick of doing everything for everybody else. That's the only thing I'm worried about, is just like how much they're just asking too much of him too soon. He misses 3 games. Burden. He comes back and he's like basically playing 40 minutes again. It's just like, God damn, like, can we get this guy a breather? In mid-November, can we give him a little bit of a rest?
Seriously, I agree with you. But that Laker game, just so mean. So mean and vicious. They hate the Lakers so much. I asked Jamal Murray about this too, and he was like, like, they came to like, a bunch of their fans always invading our freaking arena and all of that. They have a disdain and disgust for that organization, and they show it every time by just smacking them around. Crazy.
I still think it's ridiculous. Like, am I wrong about the timing of this? That Jokic was already an MVP, already building a playoff resume that was pretty substantial by that point. Basically, one of the best postseason performers in the league, and got dinged on that top 75 players of all time list for like AD and Damian Lillard and some of those guys. Am I misremembering that?
I don't remember who actually made that, because that list was bogus to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think there was a level of skepticism around Jokic that I think was healthy, and some of it was legitimate around like, oh, this, slow-footed big and this new era of the NBA, space and blah, blah, blah. And people had a healthy skepticism, but I don't think any of those people, like, it's over. Like, you got to be out your monkey-ass mind if you think AD, at his best, has been a better player than Nikola Jokic. There's just no argument for that. And I love AD. Love him.
I would genuinely like to hear the argument from anyone out there who thinks another player has been better than Jokic this season. We talked about this on the last pod. I would love to hear the counter argument, because on lift, on impact, on everything you would look at and desire in a player, I feel like he's been that guy. And the Nuggets have not been the kind of team that they want to be, or that anyone would want to be who wants to see them contend or who's interested in that. But it's not his fault, I'll tell you that much. Like, he's carrying any lineup he's a part of, including lineups that just don't have point guards in them. Just like, Nikola, go out there, do this, carry everything around you all the time, 30-point triple-doubles. It's preposterous.
The biggest feather in his cap might be that he's making the him and Westbrook combination work. Like, he kind of called the shot, and there is a little bit of like chemistry forming on the pick and roll between the two of them that it's kind of interesting. I'm interested in Russell Westbrook again. That's his biggest feat.
There we go.
Water into wine.
Wow.
Just to put a button on this. So the list was announced October 2021.
Okay.
So really before his first MVP season. So he didn't have an MVP, didn't have the title.
No, didn't he win in 21?
He won 20. Oh, yeah, you're right. So this would have been after his first one. You're right.
Yeah. Which granted, like one MVP does not a career make. But if we're kind of penciling in players who are active based on what they might accomplish, I feel like he was right at the front of the list.
Dame's the guy. Dame's the guy where it's
Dame
like...
is the guy, yeah, for sure.
But Dame was critical to like the first half of that decade where like he was going toe-to-toe with Steph. So I see it, but you're right. That's a pretty big oversight. But as long as Bob Pettit is here, we're good.
Facts.
Why don't we wrap it there? Thank you to Cliff Augustin for filling in on production. No pod on Thursday, so we'll be back on Monday as per usual. Until then, happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon.